to start this project, we decided we wanted the wood stove, and the reason we wanted the wood stove is because we wanted to be able to obviously heat with wood, right? Okay. So I know I'm including you on the video. And so we wanted to be able to heat with wood. That was really important because we had a ton of wood on the property. We had the ability to harvest a pretty much indefinite amount of heat just from our own property without even having to drive anywhere. So having that capability was really important to us. So when we started this expedition into into setting up our wood stove and building the hearth and everything, the first step was to figure out the location of where we were actually going to put it. And luckily, we had an interior wall that fit really, really well with where we wanted to go, and it placed the actual stove itself almost dead center of the house, and so it allows the heat to radiate out really, really well. And it's so close to the center that actually our stovepipe comes out about 3 inches left of the peak, so really, really close to the center of the house. Now, the next step was to figure out kind of what materials we wanted to do this out of. We went back and forth on this for a long time because we were figuring out what meets with the code requirements for fire safety, as well as what materials actually fit with the kind of look that we wanted, and then what would provide us the best functional fit to the actual process. And so the best thing that we found for us was, from a functional standpoint, was going to be the brick. And the reason that we used real brick with this is because it gives a nice big thermal mass to absorb that heat and then help release it throughout the night. We could find it relatively inexpensively for reclaimed brick from a cotton mill that we found around, and so from that aspect, the brick just seemed to really fit. The other option was having true stone, but stone was a little bit harder for us to source. The brick was just really easy for us to source, and it fit with aesthetically what we wanted it to look like in the end product. And so the first thing was to get a load of brick, which load of brick weighs a significant amount. This was, I think, about 5,000 pounds worth of brick is what it worked out to be, but it may have been a little bit more, and so much so that we probably should not have been using that trailer for it. But once we got the brick back here, we took it to the spot where it was actually going to be installed, and we decided at that point in time we needed to do the layout of it. So we laid out the bricks, kind of figuring out the pattern that we wanted and how we wanted the bricks to look. And then once we had the layout, that's when we actually the work began. We started marking it up and then removing the drywall as the first step. Next step is to install the hardboard, and so we placed the hardboard up, and obviously using all the approved screws and everything for it, and then we tape those joints, and then after the joints are taped, we apply the mortar in there, so that gives us a nice fire barrier. You can go directly to the drywall. It's not the ideal way to do it, but you're able to do that. It depends on the fire code for your area and how that's looking and what your clearances are with the stove, so there's a little bit more that goes into that. Ours, we had enough clearance without having any barrier at all, so the brick for us was really just extra, and we really wanted the thermal mass as well as the aesthetic appeal to it. And so to us, this was just kind of a little bit overkill. Then at that point in time, we're able to lay the hearth base and get a good solid base and footing underneath this. Now, the way we laid ours is we laid ours with the bricks perpendicular to the wall. And what that allowed to do is distribute that weight a little bit further away. And the reason we want to do that is because even though we're on a slab, that's a lot of weight in a very, very small area for a slab. And so we wanted to distribute that weight as best we could. And then so after that first row that was distributed perpendicular to the wall, the rest of them we laid out in a pattern. So it ended up giving it kind of a nice look towards the end. After that, we were able to start erecting the walls, and obviously the important thing with those walls is making sure that each row is actually very, very level. So we spent a lot of time leveling them out, and then we're placing the tie backs in there. There's different structures for how you want to do that based off of the structural integrity of the wall. Again, we probably overkilled this a little bit. We did a tie back about every 3 rows, but the tie backs worked really well to help hold that wall in and give us a really good solid feel when we were done. And then the temporary braces, you can see that we kind of put some temporary braces in periodically, and those just until some of the mortar dried, and then we removed the braces there. But the tie backs were really useful for actually setting those temporary braces. The last part to this is getting the stove centered in the pipe installed, the stove pipe installed. This was a really hard portion of it. Actually, it took almost all day to do. The stove pipe, it seems easy, but it's a lot of work up in a very hot attic, and so it's kind of a pain. And then we also have a metal roof on the house, so there's a lot of trimming in the metal, trying to get the flashing lined up and everything. And so that was kind of a hard portion in and of itself that probably justifies a whole separate video. But the ins and the outs of it are, you install the support box in the attic, and then that's what actually runs and connects the attic pieces to the house itself. Then we use triple wall stovepipe all the way from the base of the ceiling through the attic and then out the attic. Once you're out the attic, you're going to install your flashing, your storm collar, and the actual support, the supporting member of the flashing that supports the chimney pipe up there. And then that all has to be drilled in and then cemented in place. And so that was a relatively easy process, but it did take all day. So it was a little bit of a pain. And like I said, you're spending all day in a hot attic. So other than that, the end product, we have a nice wood stove. We've heated all winter long with a wood stove. Haven't had to fire up the heater once yet. And it's been a real blessing.